Hi everyone, this is Counseling 4000, Chapter 19, Receiving and Releasing Information. Some people come in having been treated or seen in other places or at other times. Before you can adequately plan, it is a good idea to obtain records or summaries of past treatment or services. And the reason for that is because maybe you're going to use an intervention that's already used before, but it just didn't work. So it's good to know if it didn't work the last time, and then maybe use something else as a treatment or an intervention for that specific person. Allows you to understand the client and also prevent ineffective treatments from being used. Sending for information. Have clients sign appropriate forms to release records to the agency. After the interview, mail or fax these forms to the other agency, and this may take a while and repeated requests might be needed. So what happens is if you're working at, let's say, agency A, right, and your client has been seen at agency B, maybe 10 years ago. So what you do is you're going to have forms that you're going to request information, but you're going to have your client sign it. And then from there, we're going to mail it or send it over to client B or agency B. And then agency B will then send you all that information. Sometimes it takes a while because let's say if it's 10 years ago and it was on paper, they might have stored it at some sort of storage facility. And then they have to actually send someone over there to pick it up. So it might take a while. It might take forever. You might never get it. So it's something that you need to be aware of when it comes to getting information. If you release information, it is important to protect the records. Talk to the case manager about what information is relevant to be released. Sometimes we think it is no big deal, but there may be bigger consequences of privacy, and we don't want to violate those things. Releasing information without written consent is unethical and also illegal, unless for specific reasons of health that have been discussed before. And when working at your agency, make sure the forms are specific to the information and not a generic form. So it really does need to talk about the specific reason why you're getting it. Direction for using release forms. There's a standard release form, and then there's an HIV/AIDS status release form. And they're different, and there's a reason why, because HIV is a special issue as well. All right, general release form refers to the client, their full name, their date of birth, and then you want to hear something that says something like this, which is, I hereby authorize blah, blah, blah. It is the client speaking and authorizing the release or receive. If the client allows you to release information to the other agency, check the first box. The purpose, developing a service plan or a goal planning or developing a treatment plan would be the reason. And if the client allows you to receive information from another agency, check the second box, provide the name of that agency. For the purpose of blank, refer to why the materials is being sought. Is it for goal planning, treatment planning, developing a service plan, or ascertaining past medication for the purpose of prescribing? Again, you want to be very, very clear and specifically why you're getting this information. Write the date on which the permission to release information will expire. Usually it's 90 days from the signature dates on the form. Information you are seeking, best to obtain them in summaries. You do not want all the client's medical records because you do not need all of them, or that nor will you be able to store it all. Medical records pertaining to the most recent thyroid surgery from April 16, 2018 might be what you might say there so that we know. Because maybe this person has been in the hospital and they for years and years and years and years. So you might have 15 books worth of stuff. You don't want to comb through 15 books worth of stuff. So to be more specific about, a more recent diagnosis or treatment may be very helpful for you. In terms of authorized signature, signature of the adult or the signature of the parent or guardian if the client is a child. The case manager will also countersign the form and then also date it as well. Your signature goes on the line next to the authorized signature as the person who will receive the information from the other agency. Date your signature. If your client is not able to write but is able to indicate that he wants his records sent to you, you will need to get 2 witnesses to sign. Staff person is you, so sign again here and then date it. In terms of HIV/AIDS related release forms, only use when the information to be released contains references to the person's HIV/AIDS status, including testing for HIV that was negative. Okay, so it doesn't matter if the person was positive or negative. This is very sensitive materials, and so we'll talk a little bit about how to handle that. The client has given permission for the information to be released. Fill out the general release form and then staple the other forms together. So you're going to actually need to have both. The 90-day form for the general release form applies to the HIV release form as well. Most states have laws providing that HIV/AIDS information is to be released only to people who have a need to know. So just because you want to know as your counselor or whatever, you actually don't have the right to know if this person is HIV positive unless it pertains specifically to a reason why they're receiving services, okay? Medical and physical care of the person or person who performs first aid, they might need to know. And so then, yes, you need to then find out. But if you're not doing anything like that, then no, you do not need to know if a person has HIV. Therapy and therapeutic programs and other services do not need to know about the client's status. So the reason why what I'm saying there is, let's say that you are a therapist and you're going to provide therapy for a client. Do you really need to know if they are HIV positive if they're coming in to talk about the breakup of their boyfriend? No, not necessarily, right? So it's definitely not something where you can just request it just because you want to know. And the reason why is because there's a lot of stigma when it comes to HIV. People are really afraid and scared, even though they shouldn't really be scared anymore. And also, it's not a death sentence anymore, which is what it was seen as in the 80s and 90s. Now, a lot of people actually live with HIV happily and healthily for their entire life. Okay, so, but because there is a lot of negative stigma when it comes to that, we want to make sure that this is something that is private and protected for that person. If your client does not want HIV/AIDS material released, you must send records with all references to the client's status and delete it or destroy it. Blacking out portions of the record is insufficient because copies that people can see give away a person's status. Because of the way that it's written might be a way where people can tell, oh, well, we're blacking out a lot, which probably means that they're positive and not negative. Because if it was negative, they might just say HIV negative, and then they don't need to write a lot. So people make assumptions about that. So that's why you need to destroy it or not have it in there at all. Delete that section. Records must go out with no mention and no obvious deletions of HIV status. So if it's not important, you get rid of that whole section so no one can assume or make assumptions about that person like that. When the material is received, you can construct a fairly accurate clinical picture of the person who has come to you for help. So far, the person's initial description of the problem, you've also had their social and medical history, the person's expectations for services, done some preliminary planning with that person, familiar with the DSM categories that might or might not apply, and of course that mental status exam, which is kind of like the, your impressions and your opinions about and recommendations for that client for receiving services. Other issues related to releasing information, even when you are dead, you still have the same privacy rights. Isn't that great? The executor of the estate or the spouse of the deceased has a right to request and receive records after a person has died. You have the right to request that all your records not be accessible to family members. Did you know that? And also, if the spouse's lawyer requests, you do not need to release. If the court subpoenas the records in a court proceeding, your agency will deal with how to respond to that specific thing, because then there might be for a specific reason.